we want our world to be beautiful, and because we're humans and we have tools and we're able to change the world, we want it to be a place where we feel comfortable, and what art imagines becomes possible. So that always inspires me.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Creative Block. Today's guest embodies the intersection of art and technology and innovation. I'm thrilled to introduce Anna Shaposhnik. Anna is a creative technologist on a mission to revolutionize storytelling in space. As the CEO of Orbital Entertainment Supply, Anna is developing free-flying robots that capture breathtaking footage in zero gravity. A recent graduate of USC's prestigious Iovine Young Academy, Anna holds a BS in Arts Technology and Business of Innovation, with a specialization in connected devices and making. She has also ventured into astronautical engineering, bringing a unique interdisciplinary perspective to her work. Her impressive resume includes roles as marketing manager for Orbit Fab, a startup building gas stations in space, and a graphic designer and machinist at USC's Rocket Propulsion Laboratory, the first student-run lab to successfully send a rocket in space. What sets Anna apart is her belief in abandoning the siloed engineered stereotype and embracing aesthetics in all aspects of technology. A strong advocate for blending art and engineering, she claims to bring creativity and delight to the space industry. Anna invites young women from all backgrounds to see themselves working in space and emerging creative technologies. Space not only needs engineers, but it needs artists and designers and architects and lawyers, business people, policymakers. Anna, you and I were introduced through a mutual friend, Matt Scott. He was telling me some of the IMAX materials that you guys were working on. He was like, you have to talk to Anna. So I want to really thank you for being on the show. I have to tell you, in your honor, I'm wearing my Moonwatch, my Omega Speedmaster 1970. Amazing. I've got my vintage Cold War space graphics going on. So thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy, so I'm grateful for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So your background, art, technology, engineering, we think about engineering, we think about art, we think about design. Tell me about how you came to be where you wanted to break this down and sort of blend everything.
Absolutely. I would say most of it started in high school robotics. I was part of the first robotics competition FRC team in my local high school. We build basically, 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet big aluminum robots, completely machined in-house, and all the graphics and art and t-shirts and posters and banners are also part of it. First Robotics prides itself on being kind of like a game for the mind, and so they bring in the sports excitement and the artistic excellence to the robotics competition itself. And so that's where I saw the world of those two blended, where people could be so passionate for robotics just as much as they are passionate for sports, for example, or for art, or for creative entertainment. And so seeing that engineering could be as exciting and enhanced by art really inspired me. Also, watching a lot of YouTubers like Martin Molin, who built the Marble Machine, the excellence in engineering in the making of music. Adam Savage, who pioneered visual effects and making props for movies. Simone Yetch, who's an amazing YouTube inventor. Disney Imagineering, of course, was a huge inspiration. And Shane from Stuff Made Here, who again brings excellence to engineering, but for creative and interesting challenges that you wouldn't see in like a professional environment. They use their creativity to solve problems people don't necessarily think of engineers needing to solve, like, for example, like tracking a basketball hoop or other interesting things. So growing up in that YouTube environment, I think, of my generation really inspired me to see that art could be part of engineering, and it enhances it. It enhances it because, our humanity is so important, not only the engineering of just solving problems, but solving problems in a human way where we're considering what our human needs are in those challenges. That's where design comes in too. And that's why, I wanted to pursue a major that blended those two and was able to give perspectives from both.
I love that. I love that conversation. I've always been a big fan of, technology and art, and you're a great example of that, where you pay attention to that. The design of something translates to how people perceive it beyond its function. So paying attention to that, I think, is really important. So I appreciate your approach to that, because I think it's really exciting what you've done so far. Did you come out of folks that were in engineering or art?
My parents are both, engineers. They're both computer programmers and math majors. So they were definitely very technical and pushed me a lot to think about that. But I decided to go like the 180. I never really enjoyed programming that much. I came back to it now and see the value, but I was always like, I don't want to learn what my parents are, do for their day job. So I was mostly artistic throughout my young adulthood, and I would, often see my favorite comic books or see my favorite animations and try to trace them and learn about that way. And then, attended different art programs. I was very, my parents supported that passion, so I was very lucky to have that. And then in high school, they had both art and the robotics. And what invited me to robotics was that they had the art side. And so I was more confident to step in because I knew I could already contribute to the t-shirt. Even if I didn't know about the engineering of the robot, that pathway of art led me into it and made me feel invited. And so later I did become the co-president of the robotics team. Something I might not have imagined when I first stepped into that room. And
I love that.
I like that you mentioned that, art shows how engineering is perceived. And a cool example I saw recently, Blended Worlds is an initiative by PST Art in LA right now. And they had a chief engineer from JPL, Adam Seltzner, come in. And he shared a really cool story. He said that, he went to a classroom of students and he was showing them pictures of the rover on Mars and its end of life. And a smart Alex student raised their hand and was like, so isn't that littering? And Adam Seltzner was a smart aleck himself. He said, no, it's an art installation, the art of the possible. And so, in space industry for me specifically, seeing that it's kind of propped up by science fiction and comic book artists and what art imagines becomes possible. So that always inspires me.
So as a creative technologist in the space industry, what has been some of the challenges you've come across? I know that, this is really kind of a male-dominated field. It's also connected to a lot of business culture. What's the ROI? What's the end result? So as you came through, what did you find was a bit challenging?
My first experience within the space industry was a very positive one, fortunately. I was able to, get my foot in the door at Orbit Fab, and that was in great part to the Z Factor Fellowship, which helps underrepresented students and women and people of color and people with disabilities get into the space industry when they might have been overlooked if they were, applying by themselves. And so Z Factor Fellowship both connected me with a community of like-minded people, and we were able to work on a year-long community service project. And they also connected me with Orbit Fab, which I was able to interview for different companies, and then Orbit Fab selected me. So that was a super positive experience for me, like coming into the industry. Whereas I know that I've met so many women who've been in the space industry for a while who just couldn't get their foot in the door. And of course, the space industry started off as completely male dominated. You wouldn't see a single woman in mission control. And the people who did break through, like Miss Northcutt, who I actually got to meet in person, like
wow.
incredible, just
wow.
pioneering women who just like, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to be in mission control. So being in the space industry makes me look up to that kind of grit and rigor of women who came before me, and that really inspires me. And I'm fortunate to say that I was able to get my foot into the door. There's another organization that really inspires me for people listening. It's called Astro Access, and I was super lucky through Z Factor Fellowship. I actually got a chance to be on a 0G flight, and it was a storytelling 0G flight. So they had like a lot of different organizations from the space industry. And Astro Access was testing accessibility for blind and other disability astronauts in the 0G plane. For example, they had an experiment where they put like tactile fabric on the side so that blind astronauts could feel around the orientation in zero gravity. And one cool thing that they say is, if you make space accessible for everyone, you make space accessible, for these incredible astronauts who actually have an excellent benefit. When the lights go dark in a space station, a normal sighted astronaut, wouldn't know what to do. And that's, space is so prone to these, dangerous situations that people with the added ability of knowing how to, communicate across long distances with sign language, for example, in like the emptiness of space, or, feel in a dark environment, have an actual advantage. And that's also very inspiring to me in terms of accessibility for the space industry.
What about some of the projects that you're most proud of to this point? What stands out for you that's the most exciting that you're working on?
Ooh, I'm like a person filled with just a bunch of side projects, so it's hard to choose one.
I understand.
It's currently a really exciting one I got the chance to volunteer as part of NASA incubated solar gravitational lens mission. And so I'm helping with their brand development and community building. And they're trying to like bootstrap the project, but it was NIAC funded initially. So it's a really inspiring project because they're trying to send a string of solar sails further than Voyager has even gone by like slingshotting it quickly around the sun. And then they come to a focal region really far away where if they look back at the sun, kind of like looking back at a projector, you see the sun bending light rays around, and it's called an Einstein ring, of an exoplanet that's behind the sun. So you can decode that little kind of bent ring of light around the sun looking back into the very first 1,000 by 1,000 pixel image of an exoplanet, which is actually impossible to see with current telescopes. You'd need one the size of LA County, like a mirror the size of LA County, to be able to see an exoplanet right now in the same way that we can see our Earth from the moon, for example. So that's very inspiring to me. And I love the concept of solar sails because I'm also trying to write my own story. And that's inspired by solar sails and by actually society living in the cloud layers of Venus. And that's the story I'm currently developing. I love thinking about, I want more Art Nouveau style for those islands, and I want an Art Deco style in a black hole, which is part of the story as well. And imagining what a solar punk future would look like on the cloud layers of Venus, with Earth as more of like a national park that you visit very often. So yeah, and it's just very, very fun to think about the future in those ways and the possibilities. I'm personally I don't think we'll actually settle Mars as much as we might settle Venus, because the cloud layers are a really cool opportunity to also have a very Earth-like environment. Whereas on Mars, like, you take your helmet off, you're going to explode. So I don't feel it's as friendly or as interesting of an environment. But it's very interesting to think about.
So I'm going to ask a nerd question right now. You're talking about Venus only because there's a hot side and a cold side, and in between is a cool side, right? For adaptability to humans. It's
not necessarily about sides. It's just like the kind of in the atmosphere, there's a region in between where that layer is, the temperature and pressure is similar to Earth. Of course, there's still acid rain. There's other things to worry about. But because the temperature and pressure and even the gravity is pretty similar to Earth's, it is a place where we could have like blimps floating and people living there. And my story also imagines, the atmosphere on Venus super rotates, so it's faster than the ground. So if you were to build, for example, a factory on the ground layer of Venus, which by the way is very hard, it's super high pressures, but we did land a spacecraft there, so it's possible. But you could presume that you build like a factory of robots that are mining something on the ground layer of Venus, and then every I forgot what it was. I think 24 days or something like that. Don't quote me. But it super rotates, and they meet up again. And I have an elevator in my story where they bring up the factory that they mine from the ground up to the cloud layers, and those kinds of things. Like, from looking at the science and imagining what it could be, that's I think where the artist perspective comes in. Is like, socially, what would that look like with those situations in place?
I love that. So you're CEO of a company focused on innovative technologies for space, and you're a storyteller. So talk about that bridge and how sort of the average consumer in the future will make that connection.
My startup's name is Orbital Entertainment Supply. We are building free-flying robots for the inside of zero-gravity environments, such as zero-G planes or space stations. They're about yay big. They're 10 centimeters in diameter, currently modeled. And originally the idea was to use piezoelectric thrusters, which instead of electric fans or pressurized air is much smaller. You're applying electricity over a little membrane that vibrates to push and pull air. We're considering what method we're using, but that's an interesting initial idea that prompted miniaturizing the robot to be able to move it around. And so what inspired this is actually interviewing a lot of people who have filmed creative projects in zero-G planes and space stations. There's been TV shows, music videos, commercials, even The Bachelor filmed an episode in a zero-G plane. And currently, the camera operator is holding this thing. They're floating themselves, so they're trying to figure out how to get this camera stable. And often they actually have to have a second person pull them by the collar down the center of the zero-G plane just to get like a stable shot. And in my mind as an entrepreneur, it's like that's not enough. We have to do this better. And what also can we do that enhances the possibilities in weightlessness? Can we orbit something? Can we have a swarm of little robots that can 3D map something that's not possible on Earth? And so that's where I decided to start the company and explore those opportunities. And one opportunity for the general public that I'm really excited about is if these robots become a staple in the future private space stations that will replace the ISS, you could actually have people logging into these robots just to fly them around for fun, for kindergartner's birthday party, or to play like a game with someone from from a different country from you. So that's also a huge vision that we have, is enhancing camera stability and camera movement. Also, lighting is an opportunity, and finally, inspection services and getting general public to operate the robots.
Wow. I could see Red Bull races.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, Red Bull, for people watching, Red Bull has a really great video in zero gravity where they do a pit stop in zero G. They have a giant car floating in a zero G parabolic airplane, and they flip it over and they, change the wheels. It's like, what?
I want to dive into this. We touched on it a little bit about aesthetics and technology and design and technology. I always have been a big fan of discovering design in the ordinary, finding design in industrial tools that have no consumer application, and yet somebody spent a lot of time designing this. We see this out of Deco. We see this out of Diego Rivera's paintings in the industrial age and things like that. For you, why do you gravitate towards that, and why do you think it's important to people?
We want our world to be beautiful, and because we're humans and we have tools and we're able to change the world, we want it to be a place where we feel comfortable. And it's really, it always ties back to the emotions, I think, for us, is if you're holding a tool that feels like it has weight and it has quality, you're happier, you're going to use it better, you're going to know how to use it, because it feels like this should open and this should do this. And ultimately maybe you work faster. For example, Apple pioneered, bicycle for your mind, like all of those beautiful ways to reimagine how technology integrates with us. Steve Jobs studied typography because he wanted the aesthetics to be a part of our experience, to be a part of making us faster at what we're working on. And so I've always, thought about, is art really for utility? Design, the word design, I think, comes from applying art to something that's, utility based. If you make this font better, then we will read it easier, et cetera, et cetera. That's utility based sort of art making. And then there's also art for ourselves, for exploring our own emotions, for exploring, fine art, abstract art. What does this make you feel? What did the artist go through to make this? That's also a separate aspect to it. Even for emotions, it's important to have art, just, for us to feel good. And so in that way, art also kind of has, utility to our well-being. And so for people who sometimes I meet people who don't understand the value of fine art, for example, or of design. And to them, I'm like, hey, would you rather have a world, like a black and white world with one font and a really hard to use computer with a sticky touchpad? These are all designers working to do these things. And of course they're collaborating with engineers to make it possible, but they're the ones thinking about and considering these things.
Yeah, I've talked to several experts I've been fortunate enough to talk to a lot of experts in the AR, XR, VR world, and this conversation of experience comes up a lot. And it's not just, here's what we can build and here's the space that we can create. Especially as I think about, connecting brands or connecting to consumer adoption, there's always this term that comes up, a good experience. People want to create good experiences for what they're interacting with. It's like, that's what we do.
And make memories. Memories are a huge part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about Orbital Entertainment. This is so interesting. This project that you're doing, the camera, it only works in weightless with atmosphere. Is that correct? It won't work in open space. No. Gotcha. The zero gravity plane that you were fortunate enough to be in, they call that the vomit comet, don't they?
That's true. That's true. They gave us scopolamine patches to paste behind our ears. So that's kind of the same thing astronauts sometimes use in training. That helped. Yeah. I didn't feel sick at all, which very lucky about that.
That's fantastic. And so how have you tested this to feel like it's an actual viable mechanism?
We've had a benchtop setup that's tested the thrusters. We're still deciding if we're going to continue with that technology or not. It's yet to see. But our general plan of action is we're currently raising funding. We're raising about $100,000 just for the first prototype before a bigger seed round. And we actually were invited to FRAM-2, which is a private astronaut mission that's doing polar orbits. There's a filmmaker on that mission called Jannica Mikkelsen, and she was willing to bring up a prototype if we finish it in time. And we'll see if we can. But even if we don't, we also have an opportunity to fly on a zero-G plane Q1 of 2025, which
Wow.
we're aiming towards. And so right now it's like, fundraising first, then we're going to get together and finish building the robot itself. We're going to submit it to either FRAM-2 if we get that in time, or a zero-G plane and test it there. So currently we have just benchtop, and we're trying to test integrated unit and raise funding for that.
So there was speaking of Red Bull, there was the one gentleman a few years ago, he jumped out of an upper atmosphere environment and did a free fall. Your device, your camera wouldn't work there, right? Because of the friction of the fall in the atmosphere, or would it?
Yes and no. The biggest challenge is like the air speed, and like it's not like a still air environment, which
Right.
is a little bit different. Theoretically, you could make a robot that pushes air out and moves itself while it's falling. I would say ours piezoelectrics exerts such a small force. It's not that powerful. It's only powerful
Right.
if you're a really small robot in a really still air environment. And so again, that's a thing we're exploring, right? If we use electric fans or pressurized air, there's a lot more opportunities there. However, pressurized air is not as good for astronauts because you don't want to create pockets of any kind of air in the nice air that we can breathe. For example, there used to be a robot called Spheres, which was decommissioned in favor of the Astro B block robots that are now on the ISS, because it was creating air pockets of air and other issues with the pressurized gas canisters. So they switched to electric fans. But yes, theoretically, yes, skydiving is equivalent, and you could make a robot to move around. And also underwater is a very similar environment that you can push
Interesting.
against.
Yeah, wow. How did you come up with this concept?
At the beginning, it was really about the interviews. I knew I wanted to be in an intersection of entertainment and space somehow. And my senior year of Iovine Young, we actually have to create a startup as our senior project for the whole year. And so I partnered up with my friend Luke at the time, and he's a product designer. And I had taken a class with Matt Scott, actually, his IMAX filmmaking class. And one of his guests was astronaut Terry Virts. And astronaut Terry Virts filmed a beautiful planet for IMAX on the ISS, and he had these pictures of him floating with cameras, getting these beautiful shots. We saw the movie, he spoke about it, and I asked him what's the biggest challenge, and he was like, there's no dolly tracks in space. It's so hard to get a smooth fly through, because when you push off and then you start just drifting a little bit somewhere, and you can't really have anyone help you there. And so a robot would be perfectly positioned for that, because they can just see with vision where they're going and just track perfectly smoothly. And also bogan arms actually is something a lot of people who film up there now know to use, is because they're kind of tripods for zero gravity in that sense.
Wow. So are you counting the days when you're sitting on a rocket and going to space?
I would love to go to space, not permanently. I love it here on Earth. I'm not actually in favor of going to Mars or anything like that. So I would love to fly around the moon and come back, or go to, there's a new company called Space Perspective. They do big balloons that float up to
right. I
the
saw
edge
that
of Earth,
mock-up. Yeah.
and then come down. That's very cool. Obviously, nothing beats the thrill of a rocket engine starting. So I would love to experience that in my life. But yeah, I think humanity can imagine new ways to visit space, and ways that we can get more people visiting space. For example, with the balloons, they're fully sustainable. It's incredible that you can get so many people in that basket, have them see the overview effect, and have them come down safely, which I'm so happy that company exists. And for rockets, very important, but I think they should be used for when they need to be used. For example, for incredible space missions that monitor the Earth's climate, incredible exploration missions that help us understand the universe, and the astronauts who would be working up there for, the future of asteroid mining, or the future of propellant in space, like I used to work at Orbit Fab. So those are really important things that help us down here on Earth is what makes space so special, I think. And people forget that, and the media forgets that, and that makes me sad, when I see the billionaires in space headlines, and that's not really what space is all about. And the select few that go up there help fund these amazing things that do help us here on Earth. So.
So it's rare that I get to talk to somebody who's as smart as you. So I just have so many questions. But what have you guys thought about space trash?
Yeah,
and like solutions for that? That
is definitely a huge issue in the industry. Kessler's syndrome, of course, is on everyone's minds. It's like, hey, if a piece of trash bumps into another satellite and they break apart, like it starts kind of cascading across our orbits. And there's, increasingly year by year, as these mega constellations put their satellites up, there's more risk. And there's people like Leo Labs and other startups monitoring this. There's Privateer Space, which actually Wozniak is a part of, and an incredible space environmentalist, Marie Bajaj, as well. You can find him on LinkedIn, writes about space sustainability. They're using like incredible, I would say, software tools, mostly software and like vision-based tools to see track it, have a map of even down to the smallest space trash. And then you have to think about solutions. Can we put lasers up in space that can like blast, like just apply a little bit of, momentum to a small piece of space trash and get it out to an orbit where it's in the graveyard orbit or it's somewhere else where it's not in the way. That's an opportunity. Us at Orbit Fab, we're planning an architecture where you have a gas station, like depot, and then a shuttle that can move propellant to satellites that need it to keep them up there longer to prevent space trash, or to help a space tug, which is kind of like a tow truck in space, like clip on like a jetpack to a satellite and move it somewhere else where it needs to be. So there's just an incredible plethora of startups who are trying to make an ecosystem work for us and work for moving things out of the way and organizing space how it needs to work. People listening, you can be a part of this. This is a huge opportunity. But the biggest opportunity is actually finding a business model that works for this, because that's, I think, the biggest challenge.
It has to be profitable, right?
Exactly. Yep. And the government can pay for some of it, but you also have to find a case for, moving space trash out of the way and making this ecosystem happen. So that's a challenge for sure.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I have like really random projects going on right now. I'm trying to make triple parallels for sailing, which is like a product that doesn't exist anymore, for like mapping charts and stuff. I did the sailing class at USC, and now I'm like hanging around helping them design products, which is kind of fun.
So the takeaway is that you don't sleep.
Yeah, I still have a healthy balance, fortunately. I would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super impressive.
Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much for being on the show. This is so exciting and so informative. I love this subject. I talk all day long about space. I really appreciate your expertise and your point of view. Super impressive what you built so far. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Tell people where they can follow you, follow your projects online.
Totally. So I have a few places. I have like a portfolio of my work. If you just search my name and graphic design, anna.portfolio.com, .myportfolio.com. And then I also have a website where I did like a research project on art and engineering collaboration during the Cold War era, which is super interesting and has a lot of detailed texts and screenshots of first person accounts of how people viewed artists and engineers in that era, and how that compares to now. That's if you search art plus engineering collaboration in space industry, Anna Shaposhnik, and then it's on Scalar, which is like a cool website, research website USC uses. And then I'm also on Instagram, where I share kind of daily stories about what I'm learning about. Those are at sheepiana1 and at sheepiana2_UWU. And the second one is where I share those personal stories, and the first one is graphic design mainly that I post. Like, one cool thing obviously is USC just reached space for a second time, like our rocket lab, just a few weeks ago, and so I'll definitely be sharing a lot more about that. Art inspired by that. The incredible media team is releasing T-shirts and patches and stickers, and there's an incredible artist there that created their mission patch for a phoenix kind of rising up of the ashes, because this is our second rocket, and it finally succeeded. So, yeah, those are the main places.
Amazing, amazing. So fascinating. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to watching, where everything goes in your career. And so I'm just wishing you well, and I'm super grateful for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate talking to you.
Thanks.